Hey, happy Thursday morning to you, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. I sure do appreciate you being with me. Hey, and I really I can't say enough of how much I appreciate the wonderful response to this series on Daniel chapter 9 has been and continues to be. It's so gratifying to know that my thoughts are being helpful. Okay, as I suggested and promised in yesterday's video, I want to share with you now how the atonement was not completed at the cross, meaning it was not completed in 33, 34, 35 AD. Now, I understand, I appreciate the fact that many hold to the idea that the atonement was completed at that early time. I shared with you yesterday that that's simply not tenable. 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement. The atonement is for salvation. Christ died to make the atonement. But Christ was coming again to bring the salvation purchased by his atoning sacrifice, and that coming was still future when Hebrews was written. Therefore, the atonement was not completed already. It would be completed at Christ's second appearing, proving that the 70 weeks were not yet fulfilled. I hate to be repetitious, but this is simply important that we understand this. Now, as promised yesterday, I want to share with you the fact that Revelation depicts for us the consummation of the atonement. In order to get there, we need to go back to Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9 says that those cultic practices, which were inclusive of the feast days, they stood in meats, drinks, divers ordinances, and in carnal ordinances. Divers washings, and carnal ordinances. And those things were imposed until the time of Reformation. But until the time of Reformation, there was no entrance into the most holy place. Why? Because there was no forgiveness. In the offering of those sacrifices, there is no remission of sin. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 1 to 4. Those sacrifices could never cleanse the conscience. They were for the cleansing of the flesh. Hebrews 9, 12 and 13. And so, here's what we have. Under the Old Covenant, as long as the Old Covenant Day of Atonement practices in their shadow form stood valid and imposed, point number one, there was no forgiveness of sin. And if there is no forgiveness, there's no salvation. Okay? So, as long as the Old Testament, as long as those feast days stood valid, there was no forgiveness, and as a result of no forgiveness, there was no entrance into the most holy place. Now, what that means is the typological actions of those Old Testament feast days had to be fulfilled before forgiveness could be given, and therefore before entrance into the most holy place could take place. That's why the writer of Hebrews said, to those who eagerly look for him, he shall appear a second time, apart from sin, for salvation. For, that connective particle means, here's the reason why Christ must appear again the second time. For the law having, present, active, indicative. When he wrote, the law was still active, still a shadow of the good things about to come. Now please catch the power of that. Christ had to appear the second time, consummating the Day of Atonement, because the law remained as a shadow of the good things that were about to come. Well, what were the good things about to come? His second appearing. What was his second appearing for? For salvation, i.e., to bring forgiveness. Now watch this. In Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following, John said he saw the temple in heaven opened. And he saw the ark of the testimony. Gads, what an incredible sight. But in Revelation chapter 15, 8 and following, John said, once again, he saw the temple in heaven, and the temple, and that's the naos, the most holy place, the temple was open, the Ark of the Covenant could be seen, but, hang on here, but no man could enter until the wrath of God was completed. Chapter 16 reveals to us the outpouring of 7 bowls of God's wrath. The 7th bowl would be poured out against Babylon, which is the city where the Lord was crucified. Okay, wait a minute. So, there could be no entrance into the most holy place until God's wrath was completed. God's wrath would be completed in the judgment of Babylon. Babylon was Old Covenant Jerusalem. Therefore, entrance into the most holy place would be available and would be fully opened when? At the judgment of Jerusalem. Now watch this. Hebrews chapter 9. Christ was going to appear again the second time for salvation, to bring the atonement to its consummation, to apply that which he purchased through his blood. He shall appear again a second time, apart from sin, for salvation. Still future when Hebrews was written. That would be done to fulfill the types and the shadows of the Day of Atonement, meaning the Day of Atonement shadows had not yet been fulfilled. Now watch this. At the judgment of Babylon, which is the coming of the Lord, it is declared that is the time of salvation. Hebrews chapter 9, Day of Atonement finished, salvation realized. When the priest came out of the most holy place. When Christ would come to fulfill the types and the shadows of the Day of Atonement. He would come to bring salvation. That's at the end of the old covenant system, when it was completely fulfilled. When the most holy place would be opened up and man could enter. Revelation. The most holy place is opened, but no man could enter until the judgment of Babylon / Old Covenant Jerusalem at the coming of the Lord to bring salvation. Beautiful picture. And by the way, I develop all of this in my book, Who is This Babylon? In this concept of entering into the most holy place at the end of the 70 weeks, okay, that's to make the atonement. When the atonement has been objectively made, when man has forgiveness, then man could enter into the most holy place. But the 70 weeks were confined, the making of the atonement was confined to the 70 weeks. So what does that mean? That means that since Hebrews chapter 9 and Revelation were anticipating the arrival of salvation at the coming of the Lord, at the fall of Jerusalem, which is Daniel chapter 9, 26 and 27. This means the 70 weeks did not and could not have ended in 34 or 35 AD, because that means that salvation must have already fully come by that time. But wait a minute, salvation would not come until the fall of Jerusalem, Revelation 19, 1 and 2, and salvation would not come until the coming of the Lord out of the most holy place, Hebrews 9, 28, all of which proves categorically that the atonement was not completed in 34, 35 AD. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and order my book, Who is This Babylon? Be sure to send me a note saying you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. Well, thanks again for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. Don't forget that tomorrow we will continue our examination and refutation of Brock Hollett's book, Debunking Preterism. I can assure you, you don't want to miss tomorrow's video. I'll see you on the flip side.